Good afternoon, everyone. We are at the end of the semester. It's hard to believe that this is our final class and our final meeting of the term. My name is Dr. Phillip Phillips. I'm Associate Dean of the University Honors College, and today wraps up our honors lecture series on spaces and places. Today is the day that Dean Weil and I particularly look forward to, because it's the day when we're able to showcase the work and experiences of 3 of your peers. And so they will be our featured speakers today. Just a bit of housekeeping. I went on D2L prior to class. It looks like I've received papers from about half of the class so far. The deadline is 11:59 today, so there's still world enough in time for you to submit your papers, but make sure that you do that. I also want to thank Nancy Prescott for assisting me with this class and helping all of you with your AV needs and everything else throughout the semester. Nancy, you've made things very smooth for me, and I think helped give the students an even better experience this semester. So Dean Weil and I have selected 3 students to give presentations today, and I think their work will give you a sense of the range of possibilities for honors theses. And you'll have the opportunity to hear from them about the research or creative work that they did for their project. And then at the end of the program, after all 3 of them have spoken, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions about anything. Dean Weil and I can talk all day about the honors thesis process and all of those kinds of things, but it's much better, I think, coming from your peers. And you can ask them whatever questions you want about what they've done, and I'm sure that they'll have words of wisdom and insights for all of you. So our first speaker today is Noah True, who is a computer science major with minors in honors and video and film production. His thesis was titled Ailuria, a creative exploration of adapting animals to fiction. So with that, let's welcome Noah.
Thanks. So I will add that throughout the process of writing this thesis, I did switch my major to English. So that can give an impression of just how much this project was important to me. So Ailuria is the name of my novel that I'm currently writing, and the thesis, as you can see, is about adapting animals to fiction. My thesis director was Dr. Jennifer Marchant, and thesis chair was Dr. Rebecca King. So the original inspiration for this project came from a visit to the Nashville Zoo with my girlfriend Adrienne. And we went to one of the animal shows there, and out walked Willow the binturong. And I had never heard of or seen a binturong in my entire life, and I was amazed by this really interesting creature. And so afterwards, I looked them up online and found Wilbur and Willow on the Nashville Zoo social media. And I became interested in learning about binturongs and other animals that I had never heard of before, and other uncommon animals. And it gave me the idea for a story. A lot of animal fiction that you see is about animals like rabbits and mice and dogs and cats and horses. But rarely do you see stories that are about binturongs and other animals like that. And so I wanted to write a novel. And as part of that, I wanted it to be a fantasy novel. Fantasy is my personal favorite genre. These are just a few of my personal favorites, and some of which influenced the world building of the story. But I did run into difficulties. I started the first iteration in September of 2023, and for about a year I was kind of spinning my wheels trying to get the story off the ground. I was really struggling with it for 2 main reasons. I was having trouble writing the animal characters, and I was having trouble getting past the beginning of the story, and that's a struggle that I had dealt with for a long time trying to write longer fictional works. And so my solution was to make it my thesis. By doing so, I could have the academic portion be where I can learn and discuss the how and the why of authors writing animal characters, and then use that knowledge to write the story as the creative portion. And by having a strong deadline in place, I was hoping that I could get past the beginning and really force myself to work hard and give myself the space to work hard on this story. And so, talking about the academic portion first, it's titled Bridges into the Uncrossable Chasm, and that's just a metaphor that Margaret Blount came up with in her work Animal Land. And it basically means that all works of animal fiction are in some ways bridges into an uncrossable chasm, and that is the gap between humans and animals. We can never fully understand animals. We can never fully know everything about them, their emotions, their thoughts, things like that. And so whenever an author is writing an animal character, they have to make guesses or assumptions. And usually that means that they have to make them more human, anthropomorphizing them. And so some general information about the academic portion. It ended up being 83 pages across 6 chapters. It's largely literary analysis. These are some of the most important works. There were a lot of others that were talked about. And then including secondary sources to assist in that analysis. And then each topic, which I'll get to the topics that it covers next, but each topic ends with a discussion on the choices that I personally made for my story, Ailuria. And so the first chapter of the academic portion is talking about why authors write anthropomorphized animals. The first big reason is animal symbols. You have these historical symbols like the sly, cunning fox, the wise owl, the deceptive snake, things like that have been used throughout history to create animal characters that can immediately be understood by the reader. And so that is used a lot with children's literature. There's a lot of reasons that anthropomorphized animals are important to children's literature, and that is one of them. Animal symbols are also important to commentary. A lot of animal stories comment on human historical events or human affairs using those animal symbols, like, for instance, Animal Farm. And then entertainment and fantasy, talking animals being used to increase the entertainment value or make a world feel more fantastical. Chapter 2 is about what kind of story an author is trying to tell. That includes the world, so whether it's our world, a fantasy world, somewhere in between, and how that world affects the approach to the animal characters. Thoughts, speech, and intelligence are extremely important to writing any sort of story. So how do you approach characters that are based on animals where we can't understand their thoughts, and most animals have no capacity for any sort of human speech? So do you include any sort of animalistic tendencies in those things when you're writing? And then leaving things to interpretation. What do you leave ambiguous? What do you purposefully present as ambiguous in order to allow the reader to fill in the blanks? The example over here is Aslan the lion from Chronicles of Narnia being depicted walking on 4 legs and on 2 legs in various illustrations, and therefore the reader can fill in the blanks for scenes where there's no illustrations in order to imagine those scenes. Chapter 3 is about how animal do you want your animals, and so how anthropomorphized do you make them versus real to nature, talking about whether or not they walk on their natural number of legs or 2 legs like a human, whether or not they wear clothes, how they express emotions, the example being from the 2 versions of The Lion King, where the photorealistic one that has to conform to animal facial structures is unable to express as strong of emotions in the exact same moment in the story. And so do you incorporate that into your description or not, or into your visuals? Naming conventions, whether or not animals are given human names or whether they're named differently. A big example is animals being named directly after their species. And then qualities of a species, anything unique to an animal species that is being incorporated into the description or the actual story. Widening the uncrossable chasm are some of the aspects that make it especially difficult to approach writing animals. Instincts, for one, which are, of course, very different from human instincts, and whether you include that. Animal senses, animals, of course, having very different senses from humans in a lot of cases. Sometimes animals even have senses that we completely have no way of understanding. And so, do you try to include that in any way? And then uncomfortable practices is about the issues that arise when you make animals more like humans. How do you approach things that animals do in nature that would not then conform to human moral or societal standards? The trouble with leveling the playing field is about how you approach the issues that arise when you elevate animals to the same level of intelligence as each other and potentially as humans. The big one being predator-prey relationships. When you make animals more like humans, predation tends to look a lot more like murder, and predator-prey relationships are very important to nature. They're necessary, and so do you approach that or do you completely ignore it within the story? Life cycles is about animals having wildly different life cycles and lifespans from each other and from humans, and whether you include any aspects of that in the story. The example from Charlotte's Web is that at the end of that story, Wilbur, the pig, watches spider generations going by, and so that is used as part of the themes of those animal life cycles. And then the last chapter, Animal Societies, is about how do you approach making animal societies in your story if you want to do that. The example is from Zootopia, and that is all of the environments being artificially created so that way you can have all of the animals live in one place. And so the topics within the chapter are just various aspects of writing animal societies and how you have to approach that differently because they're animals as opposed to humans. So the creative portion is titled Ailuria. The portion written for the thesis is 236 pages. It is written for a young adult age range. It is fantasy fiction, as mentioned before, and it is an incomplete first half. The way I approached it is that there are a few spots where outlining does take the place of prose, and there are a few spots where there are footnotes included to show the direction that certain aspects of the story are going and will be changed in future revisions. And that was a necessity of the scope and the length. So the story itself is about a binturong named Thelon who wakes up in this fantasy world filled with talking animals, and he has to learn magic in order to try and get his memories back and learn about his past. And so these are some of the other animal species that are featured as characters within the books. You have the black-footed cat up at the top, the jerboa off to the left, and then the bottom left is the viscacha. And then there's a few others there, and there's a lot of other species included in the books that are not depicted here as well. And so I tried to include a wide variety, and I hope to include more in the future. Some important choices that I made in regards to the story regarding the academic portion is I tried to lean more towards realism when possible. By doing so, I felt that through my creative work I could teach the audience more about animals. I could also create a more unique world and story, and also create a larger challenge for myself in the writing. And as part of that, not leaving things to interpretation, trying to make all of my choices explicit, both for the purposes of creating a more fleshed out world and for the purposes of writing the academic portion of the thesis, having more specifics to talk about there. And then creating a world designed uniquely for animal needs, things like how do you account for animals of varying sizes living in the same place? How do you account for animal senses? And a lot of the other topics covered in the academic portion, accounting for those in the world and in the story was a very big challenge. And so I learned a lot through the process of writing this thesis. One of the things I learned about was scope and how I need to narrow it. The original scope for the project was even larger than what it ended up being, and what I have now is already a very, very large thesis. And so learning to more properly create a scope that was appropriate for the project is definitely something I had to work on. But the advantage of writing so much was that I did grow a lot as a writer. I learned more about my own strengths and weaknesses, and I learned that in order to get past the beginnings of the story, it was really helpful for me personally to create a more thorough outline for the plot. And I, of course, do want to finish the novel in the future and revise it and hopefully get it published. For those reasons, the online version of the thesis is only going to include the research portion, just for extra safety. And so I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Marchant and to my girlfriend Adrienne for their help constantly throughout the process. And I want to thank you all for your time.